The idea of being forced to raise a child alone by staying with a pregnant lady whose large tummy bothered me was unbearable. I felt disgusted looking at her when she was 9 months pregnant. He knew this would happen, therefore he smiled cruelly as he looked forward to this day. I hurried to my room and returned with a few papers. I gave Brian the divorce documents. Shocked, he exclaimed, "What the hell? Why is this happening now?" "This was your idea," I retorted. "Now sign it as soon as possible. Tomorrow I'll submit it." My remarks struck a deep chord with him, and his face flushed scarlet. "Take careful note," I urged. "I'll make you regret how you've treated me." Sander is my name. I'm 27 years old. I met my boss, Brian, while working at a mobile startup 3 years ago. It didn't take long for us to fall in love and get married when I was 25 years old. 4 years my senior, Brian was a great help, especially when it came to teaching me my job as a novice with no experience. I was so appreciative of his assistance. We got to know one another and frequently went out to eat. I had never dated anyone before, so I was ecstatic when he asked me out. I was more interested in cartoon characters than actual males, which is kind of embarrassing. But I felt under pressure as I saw my friends get married one by one. I made a secret self-promise to myself when I fell in love with Brian. He would be my first and last love. I was ecstatic when I started dating Brian, and we were married a year later. Brian was well liked by our female coworkers and very attractive. Many people congratulated us, saying things like, "Congratulations," or "I'm jealous, but wish you happiness," and I felt proud to be his wife. I was ecstatic and had no idea what was in store for us. Brian dropped a bombshell the day after our marriage was officially registered. "You're married to me now, so you'll quit your job," stated the man. I informed him that it wouldn't be appropriate for me to quit on short notice because I had accepted my position on my father's advice. I wanted to explain, but I felt the strain in Brian's eyes, warning me not to dispute. "It's shocking, but I should have told you. You are not required to report to work as of tomorrow. I'll take care of the handover," Brian said. His tone was forceful, and the sudden shift made me feel lightheaded. Brian had been my boss at work, so I was powerless to stop him. Determined to make our marriage work, I departed my job without saying goodbye properly. I wanted to live up to Brian's standards, so I concentrated on doing housework. I put in a lot of labor at home cooking Brian's favorite foods. He never made a comment on the flavor, but I yearned for a thank you, especially after I resigned my job and stopped receiving the recognition I formerly had. I inquired, "Is my jacket clean?" one day. "Tomorrow is a big meeting for me." Brian said, "Yes, of course," displaying an arrogant and traditional side. I made an effort to live up to his standards while reminding myself how lucky I was to have married him. I had no own income, therefore I was totally dependent on Brian. Though generally everything went well, our relationship felt more like that of an employer and housemaid than husband and wife. But one day I became sick and was unable to move from my bed. Weak, I decided to make up housekeeping the following day. "What are you doing?" Brian demanded angrily as he stormed into the bedroom. "Get up and prepare some meals." He slapped me off with the blanket. "I'm sorry, I'm feeling unwell," I replied. "Can you manage something for yourself today?" Brian scowled and remarked, "You don't work, yet you're lying down just because you feel a little sick." I was hoping he would understand. Horrible. I got out of bed in shock. That he would have his ailing wife do housework was unthinkable. Before our marriage, I never would have imagined him to be this way. It was too much. Perhaps I should have seen it sooner. I discovered that I was crying as I was doing chores. Days went by, and my condition didn't get any better. I discovered later that I had missed my menstruation. I ran to the pharmacy in a panic and purchased a pregnancy test. It was a good thing. I was so happy that I started crying, and I told Brian the news. When he got home, the day he returned after midnight was the day I chose to tell him. However, when he entered, the smell of alcohol made me realize he was drunk. His face was flushed and he staggered as he walked. It was surprising how much he had drunk, especially without telling me. Even though I had prepared dinner, I wanted to share the pregnancy news quickly. "I haven't been to the doctor yet, so it's not confirmed," I began, eager to share our happiness. But Brian's face darkened. "A child? What have you done?" he said in a tone unlike anything I'd heard before. "I don't want a child. This is the worst. If you're going to have it, raise it yourself." His harsh words shocked me. He rudely stripped off his clothes and headed to the bathroom. It was unbelievable. I couldn't understand why he would make such irresponsible comments about our baby instead of being happy. The joy I felt moments ago was replaced with deep sorrow. Why would he say such things? He had never mentioned not wanting children before. We hadn't even been using contraception, so I naturally thought we both wanted kids. As I ironed Brian's jacket and was about to take his shirt to the washroom, I felt a deep sadness. I noticed something else. What's this? A piece of paper had fallen out of Brian's dress shirt pocket. It was a receipt. At first, I thought it was from his gathering that night and almost threw it away, but then I saw the name of the place. "Is This A Motel?" My hands trembled as I realized it was indeed a motel receipt. The shock of this discovery hit me hard. Why would Brian do this? Isn't marriage supposed to be between two people who love each other? We've only been married for just over a year. How could this happen? I've been lost in imaginary romances for years, never really being in a real relationship. I couldn't immediately accept this harsh reality. However, the idea of Brian cheating began to make sense. Had he been using me from the start of our marriage? Was he genuinely in love with someone else, while I was just a convenient servant? These doubts swirled in my mind. Was that why he reacted so harshly when he learned of my pregnancy? As I grappled with these thoughts, I felt sick and convinced that something was wrong. Maybe the reason he made me leave my job was that his mistress worked there. Everything started to make sense, as if he married me for stability and not love. The line between reality and my imagination blurred, but there was no denying the heartless words he had thrown at me after learning about my pregnancy. That day, I decided to gather evidence of Brian's infidelity. From then on, his cold behavior towards me was undeniable. It was as if he couldn't forgive me for becoming pregnant, despite knowing that I was suffering from morning sickness. He would deliberately eat smelly foods near me and nitpick my housework, forcing me to do tasks my pregnant body had to endure. A lot was happening, and my heart was heavy. Despite this, I continued to investigate his affair. Brian never parted with his cell phone, even taking it to the bathroom, making it impossible for me to sneak a peek. When I secretly entered Brian's room, it was neat and tidy, with nothing incriminating in sight. He was meticulous at work, and his desk was always in perfect order. I realized it would be challenging to catch him off guard directly. I frequently checked Brian's pockets for possible evidence, like receipts, but my investigation was proving difficult. The thought of hiring a detective crossed my mind, but I didn't have the money for it. I was deep in thought about my situation when I got an unexpected phone call from my father. He rarely called, so I was surprised. "Hello, it's me, your dad. How are you?" he asked. Considering his busy schedule, I was curious. "Dad, what's going on? Aren't you busy with work?" "My employees have been doing well, so I'm not that busy," he explained. My father, the CEO of a company in England, had always been a workaholic. I didn't have many childhood memories of playing with him, but I respected his dedication to his job. His unexpected call left me curious about the purpose. "So what's happening?" I asked, waiting for his response. He then revealed a shocking truth. "Is that really true?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes, he's not the type to lie. I want you to believe me," my father reassured me. Initially in shock and unable to respond as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I felt a sense of relief. "Thank you, Dad. I'll do my best," I told him with gratitude before hanging up. My research was finally paying off, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. However, the newfound knowledge also stirred up feelings of anger and frustration due to the ongoing tension between Brian and me. Brian continued to be distant even though I was pregnant. Each time he acted this way, I harbored a deep hatred towards him. Months passed, and our relationship remained strained. Eventually, an event occurred that shattered our life. At 9 months pregnant, I was always cautious around Brian, living in constant apprehension. I tried to avoid crossing paths with him, leading a quiet and stifled life. One day I served dinner as usual when Brian returned home. We sat at the dining table as I quietly ate. Brian suddenly slammed his fork down. "What is this? It's tasteless," he exclaimed, throwing the food I had prepared onto the floor. Baffled by his outburst, I tried to comprehend the situation. The anger at having the meal I had cooked discarded before me began to well up inside. "I've been contemplating this for some time, but recently you've been complaining about the taste of the meals I prepare," Brian criticized. While it was true that since becoming pregnant, I had been using less seasoning to make healthier meals, this was only a temporary measure until the baby's birth. If he found the food bland, he could have simply added some salt himself. Why did he have to throw the meal on the floor? I was about to complain when Brian sneered and said hurtful words. "I am a woman with a belly like a monster. You'll have to raise the kid by yourself." His eyes were filled with malice, and a cruel smile spread across his face. I had always feared this day might come, even though I hoped for a different outcome. Quickly, I went to my room, grabbed a document, and returned to Brian. "Here are the divorce papers," I said, thrusting the documents in front of him. Brian's face twisted in shock as he stammered, "What the hell? What's this all of a sudden?" "It was your idea. Now sign it quickly." "I'll submit it tomorrow," I responded. I had been thinking about divorce since I started suspecting Brian's infidelity, but with a baby on the way, I wasn't sure if I could support myself. Now I had a different plan in mind. My resolve seemed to provoke Brian. His face turned red with anger. "Just watch. I will make you regret every moment you looked down on me and controlled me. Do you think you can survive without me? You have a baby to care for, and you'll regret it," he said. I stayed determined and unshaken. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me," I assured him. Irritated by my determination, he snatched the divorce papers and began to fill them out. "Here you go. If this is what you wanted, it's yours," he said. "Thank you," I responded. Brian probably didn't think I would actually submit the divorce papers, but the next day I promptly did and left the house. I knew he would be surprised when he returned from work to find out I moved to my parents' home because my father had returned to the United States from England and suggested I stay with them. It was the right decision at the time, as I was fed up with my life with Brian. I was deeply thankful to my father. I received 5 calls from Brian on the day I left, but I ignored all of them. Eventually, he stopped calling. It became clear that I meant very little to Brian. He was probably content with his mistress and might even remarry soon. I decided to move on from Brian. 5 months passed, and I had a baby who was born safely. I was now living happily with my parents and the baby. While I was enjoying this peaceful life, Brian called again. I ignored his calls at first, but after several persistent attempts, I finally answered. "Hello, what do you want now?" I asked, tired of his tone. "Hey, what's going on? Why were you on that show, and since when were you the daughter of a CEO with millions of dollars?" Brian's voice was full of surprise and anger. Brian had seen a TV show that aired after I returned to my family home. I had received a request from a TV station because of my father's role as the CEO of a global tech company. The show featured our family's lavish lifestyle. During the interview, they mentioned our family's wealth, estimating it to be around $20 million. I never thought Brian would see that show, but TV has a way of reaching people. "Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you that I have assets worth $38 million from an inheritance. That's why I was able to divorce you," I said. My father had informed me about the inheritance, which gave me the confidence to live comfortably even after divorcing Brian. Brian was furious. What? That's dirty. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Half of it is mine, right? Give me the money now. I calmly responded, just as I thought, after seeing the show, all you care about is getting money from me. Gifts from parents are not included in the property split, and are you forgetting your own wrongdoings? Brian was puzzled and asked, What are you talking about? I'm tired of your anger, Brian. You called me yourself. You can't blame me for what you did. You cheated, didn't you? With your new wife, who is a junior from your company. You started dating her even before our marriage. Brian was clearly shocked by the information I had. I finally had the upper hand. Did you think I wouldn't find out? My father has many contacts in your company, and one of them told me about your affair. I've never mentioned it, but I'll be demanding child support, I declared. Brian objected. Stop kidding, still living in denial. Why is it that you require me to pay child support? You neglected domestic duties and became pregnant on your own. You are alone to blame. Without acknowledging his own errors, Brian placed the responsibility on me. I was amazed that I had ever married someone with such a deficiency in common sense. It was undoubtedly the proper choice to leave him. I'm broke, Brian. He sobbed pitifully. My wife squandered all the money I made, and now I'm drowning in debt. His request was ignored. My reaction changed from fury to utter shock. I vowed never to interact with someone so irrational ever again. What topic are you discussing? Are you even aware of how absurd you sound? I want no more business dealing with you. I'll let my attorney take care of child support. You won't see the child again, and you should never call me again. Farewell. I hung up the phone and banned his number right away. I exhaled deeply, feeling calmed. Isn't it over now? Brian, please stop calling, I pondered. I hurried to comfort my infant after hearing him cry in the adjacent room at that same moment. As it happened, Brian had begun making monthly child support payments. Brian's new wife was a huge spender, according to a former coworker, and he had to go into debt to pay for their costs. Brian had called me in an attempt to claim a portion of my inheritance as a result, but he received no money from me, and his expenses now outweighed his income, either because things were not going well for him or because he could not take the disdain of his coworkers. He was having difficulties. He was forced into poverty and didn't even begin looking for a job until he left his current firm. I was not at all moved to hear this from a colleague. I believed that all of his struggles were justified. I will never forget the harsh words he spoke to me or the icy way he treated me. I'm hoping he receives what he is due. However, I'm loving being a parent alongside my parents. My father discussed giving me the firm, so I believe I'll have a good life free from financial concerns. I'm prepared to go to work. I am the daughter of a diligent man.